So what can we learn from, let's say, Israel, which has a super existential threat?
What you can learn from Israel?
Yeah.
Create a super existential threat.
Why does India import most, if not all, of its weapons?
Post 2014, I think we did see a change. One, in terms of the government mindset, which said, fine, we need to be looking at a self-sustenance when it comes to defense.
Slowly, we're moving from kinetic to energy-based weapon systems because you don't need to cycle around, eject nothing. You can put a beam on and go on multiples.
Guys who've been making drones will slowly die away. But the guys who are actually making the electronics,
Hey Vivek, hey Dinesh, thank you so much for making the time. Welcome to the Bharat Varta podcast.
hey Roshan. I think the last time we were on Startup Operator, this time it's Bharat Varta.
Yeah, it was almost a year back, more than a year back in fact. Time flies, and also we're talking in different circumstances.
Absolutely.
Post Operation Sindoor. Let me get straight to the point, right? We'll begin with you, Vivek. Why does India import most, if not all, of its weapons?
Well, I think we've got to be looking at certain timelines here. And those timelines have to be calibrated with regard to also government action. There was a point in time when, I guess, back in 2014, we were extremely dependent upon the West for a lot of our military hardware. And if you also see, that was a period which had 15 years behind, of services supremacy, in the sense that we were extremely good when it came to software and services, but we'd really not invested as much in hardware. And defense hardware is a lot different from services, right? It is very heavy on R&D. It is very heavy on failures, right? And I don't think at that point in time there was as much of a concentration of companies in India which were ready to embrace this kind of a failure mindset and pivot, move on to doing things post failure and then coming up with solutions. I think we had a lot of companies which were in the services mindset at that point in time. Post 2014, I think we did see a change. One, in terms of the government mindset, which said, fine, we need to be looking at self-sustenance when it comes to defense. We did see a lot more of the focus moving away from pure services to manufacturing, R&D, hardware development, and thankfully, because of a lot of that, and also a certain a fall as far as prioritization of defense public sector units, or let me put it this way, a fall in privatization of some of the public sector units which were kind of underperforming, and diversion of resources into the private sector, which actually started taking on a little more of the pressure. So it is impossible for us to suddenly, say one fine day we will no longer be importing any weapons. Right? It is possible for us to say that going forward, we would be prioritizing these areas for imports. And in these areas, we would start be looking at more of indigenization. I think that's what's happened. It's a calibrated kind of a move which was long time coming, which should have happened much earlier, but obviously did not. I think there was also a certain misalignment of views. And that one of those views was we are never going to have a protracted war. Right? Today, if I look at the last 4 years, we're seeing conflicts pretty much everywhere, and none of those conflicts are actually 2 days or 3 days conflicts. Pretty much every one of those conflicts is kind of going into protracted conflicts. So I think going forward, you will start seeing a lot more of that impetus towards being able to indigenize, especially on defense hardware. And while yes, a lot of media tends to talk about startups, also understand this, right? That phase starting today is not anymore going to be about guys working in a garage. It's going to be about guys being able to work in a garage with certain R&D capabilities, merging with the other companies which have scalability, right? And then joining hands in many instances to put out a product which is not only good for India, but also good for the rest of the world. As far as SSS defense is concerned, for a matter of fact that we did not exist back in the year 2017. So for us, the story literally has been about plowing more and more money into defense hardware, into R&D, having that failure kind of a mindset, moving from R&D onto production, building up IP not only on the design side, but also on the production side and on the certification side today, and going from Indian markets to the foreign markets. Now that's taken us close to about 8 years. There'll be many more companies which will be doing that. Some companies have already done that, right? And that's a very, very positive news for you. But if you were to ask me why we continue to import weapons, the only answer I can give you is that a lot of that import is also happening because of the fact that we've been forced to import. When you've been buying Russian aircraft and American aircraft for the last 20 years, you have no option but to keep importing a lot of those spares. Maybe in the next few years, you may not want to import drones because there are enough guys in India who are kind of working on both the hardware as also the software side. But you can't do much about spares for, C-17 or...
anything for simple things, right? We're spending approximately, if the next Rafale deal goes through, 114, we would have spent about 25 plus another 8 billion on the previous deal, right? So we're talking at about almost 30 to 35 billion in the life cycle cost. We've not spent more than 2 billion on our aircraft engine program currently on whatever you call it, the Kaveri, multiple, whatever we've done. Per se, our total spend on our entire engine development cycle is less than 2 billion. Now, unless there is a more focused effort to invest an equal amount on what we buy, on what we develop, we'll never catch up. And engine is a gestation period. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to persist on it over the next 20 years or next 25 years with a constant inflow of fund and talent coming in. I mean, a lot of times, yes, funds can be put in, but talent is another thing. Now, a lot of talent exists. Indians out of India work on engines. Unless there's also a steady stream of them coming back or bringing them back to work on our programs, it's never going to happen. There is substantial talent here, but also experience not there, right? The guys who, for example, let's say work at United Technologies, Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, these are the guys who should come back into the stream here, or, an effort should be made to bring them back to work with the current teams here to develop capability. We can't build a small piston engine yet. We don't have one company in India currently talking about building a 4-cylinder horizontally opposed piston engine for a trainer aircraft. We still go to Rotax Bombardier, or we go to an Avco Lycoming, which is under ITAR. So we forget jet engines. We have to start with engines that will power the drones, small engines that will power unmanned other aircraft, manned aircraft, surveillance, none of them. So capability needs to be built exponentially. Investment needs to be exponentially. Most people like to get into services because it's a easy way to start businesses. Gestation time is non-existent. You can get to the market in like 3 to 6 months. But at the end of the day, you're only delivering, what do you deliver? CAD models for engines, somebody's engines, or maintenance logs for somebody's engines, but you're not building an engine. So unless bare bones requirements are met, it will be very difficult to sustain a military industrial complex. And that is the policy that needs to be focused dedicatedly on where we take this conflict to.
So the demand is there, but the supply is constrained on many fronts: mindset, capability, incentives. But do you sense like a vibe shift happening on that front? I mean, given the recent interest, as Vivek as well mentioned, do you see a lot more defense startups coming up? And more importantly, do you think that they're properly incentivized to do proper R&D, engineering, and actually make a business out of it?
See, defense startups can only do so much, right? And there'll be 90% services heavy, 10% on products. You go to any startup in any part of the world, the guy's sensors will still be somebody's sensors. The guys can sit back and code everything they want in the world. But at the end of the day, if you can't see something, what are you going to signal process? It's like your eyes. You can't see something, but your brain wants to process. Now, if you see something, you can process the cat or a dog or a bird. But if your eyes are not seeing anything, I can process, it's not going to help me. So the guys who make the sensors have to be made in India. Tomorrow, taps can turn. Somebody can just turn off the tap. You can't do a damn. On anything, on whether it's optics, whether metals, it can just shut out. We keep hearing Trump saying simple things like, funny things, whether it's true or not, that I stop the war kind of thing. He really can. I'm not kidding when he says he can. I mean, he really can. He can just go back and say, I'm going to turn the engines off. What are you going to do? You have an Air Force left without 200 planes in the next 5 years. It's that simple for somebody to do that. Right? And that kind of leverage you never give. Chinese don't give it. Russians don't give it to anybody. That's the reason they can sustain conflict over 3 years, 5 years. We're not in that situation. We need to, MIC has to grow exponentially. So the startups are all fine, but the startups are not what going to give you capability. It requires an equal commitment from the government, an equal commitment from all the big, heavily invested companies, and you're thinking in a disarray. Nobody is cohesively thinking, as a single component of building an aero industrial complex or a weapons industrial complex. No, very few people have that vision, and the government is just band-aid. You just buy bits and pieces when you need it, but you're not looking at sustaining a long battle.
Right. And we have to get our act together quickly, right? I mean, we are in a post-Operation Sindoor situation right now, and you said something interesting before we started recording, which is that war is perhaps an eventuality for us at some point in time, given just the way our neighborhood is.
Well, it is. Do you want to think any other way? I don't believe so. I don't believe at all. Or rather, let me put it this way. We can throw caution into the wind and not prepare for war. Right? But the net result of that is going to be, phenomenal damage to our confidence and our ability to have actually put in so much effort in the course of the last few years in building up a very strong economy. Nobody wants war, but we obviously need to be ready for war, right? In a country like India with its own geopolitics, if you're not ready for war, you're not doing the job. I mean, the government is not doing the job, the private sector is not doing the job, the armed forces are not doing the job. And it is the role of the armed forces at all points in time to be ready for war. It is the job of the military-industrial complex to be supporting them with the ability to scale up. Now, you also talked about something when you said the word incentives, right? Now, I have to tell you something, right? When Dinesh was talking about the Kaveri engine program and the fact that we've not really invested, one of the biggest impediments for growth of the military-industrial complex is this obsession with throwing money and getting results. Now, a venture capitalist will very openly state that over 90% of his or her bets are going to fail. Right? It is the 10% which actually gets you across the line and gives you those humongous results. Anyone who is a venture capitalist, who's a risk investor, saying that I expect to have 100% results should never be in that game. Now, the government is actually a risk investor when it comes to military industrial capability building. You have to be throwing out billions and billions of money into programs which may or may not be giving you results in 2 years or 3 years. You should be ready to lose money. You should be ready to lose money with the whole and sole objective of building platforms. It does not matter whether you're able to build a missile out of it, but if you're able to build a technology which gives you an edge against your adversary at some point in time by throwing those billions at it and even failing in the course of that, that's perfectly all right. Right? It's happened with our missile programs. It does not happen that success comes in immediately. It happens over a period of time. The Indian Navy has managed to do substantially more than most of the other armed forces because of this particular view that, we will take control over the tech and we will try and see as to where exactly this leads us to. But if we start thinking that, okay, fine, every one of our projects basically should kind of deliver results within a period of 3 years or 2 years, that's not going to happen. Which is why, again, I believe here that startups are not the only solution. I believe here that building up the military industrial complex requires nimble operators, guys like, a chap coding in his garage. It requires people who've got hardware expertise and who've kind of taken their product from R&D all the way to final production. It requires impetus coming in from Indians who've lived abroad, who work with aero and defense companies outside of India. A lot of that experience needs to be captured back. It requires support from the government of India in the sense that they've got to stop thinking about incentives. In the sense, I put in $1 billion, I should get so much in return. They're not in there to build up that profitable success story. They're in there to kind of state, I'm willing to lose money to be able to gain an edge. If that edge in war is 1%, it's still worth it. If that edge is being able to throw out more missiles and more ammunition and more drones at your adversary without being jammed, that's worth it.
Right. So if we think ahead, right, I mean, let's say 20 years ahead, what do you think has to change on each of these three axes, capability, mindset, and incentives, in order for us to become, like, let's say, top 5, top six kind of a defense player in the world, right? Looking at, let's say, $30 billion of like production in some sense, right? Because for me, like as a layperson, we send rockets, to space, right? We have the capability to do that, surely. We should have the capability to do this as well, right? I mean, so why is it different?
He's going to talk capability. I talk some of the other easy stuff.
The funny part is that you can send something that does not need to come back. You have to understand that. Rockets go, they don't come back. The moment you need to have them coming back, the entire engineering and the logic changes. So aeroplanes are like that. Right. They go, they have to come back. It's not that you just expend them one time. So the technology involved in actually making them, that reliable, that efficient, and, is something else. The one-time discard is a very easy thing, like the bullets in the gun. But a gun has to fire 10,000 times. That's the craziness of it. But the bullet just has to go once, right? So making the gun is infinitely more complex, infinitely more components that are involved in it. The technology going into it, the amount of processing needed into it is phenomenal. Starting from scratch in design to making it proof, barrel, receiver, bolt, action, cycling, so many chemical reactions happening in the explosion, so many mechanical reactions, physical change in metallurgy. You can't even factor in a conversation the amount of work that goes into a gun. The springs holding it, the springs giving away, pull as little as a kilo of energy or a weight that is put to pull the trigger. So you need a lot more knowledge, lot more engineering, lot more capability to be built before we go into making a robust system. And that's what you need on things that need to come back. With things that don't need to come back, you can keep manufacturing them and make them expendable, and that's a much more reliable and easy way to build an ecosystem. But on everything here that we do, most of them have to come back. Helicopters have to come back, aircraft have to come back, ships have to come back. So that's where you have to build a massive MIC, which we've not even scratched the surface. And if you're asking me on how to get there, one of the things both of us keep discussing in one of our previous avatars, just the state of Karnataka's power subsidy is 8,500 crores. The government of Karnataka gives a power subsidy, which means it's not bill, is about $1 billion a year, right? And we don't even put 10% of that into the programs that need that kind of money. So for a government, it's not such a big deal to build capability. But then most of the government institutions that are in the military industrial complex invariably just white label other people's stuff because it's the easy way, and it's a good masking for the people in procurement to say it's a government company supplying to us. But that government supply company is just a glorified agent for another company from another country. So he buys it, labels it as a local, white labels it as a local product and puts it in. But you're never going to have that comfort or capability. I mean, the last 6 months they've been testing a radar from a third country. Does not talk to the missiles we build. It's that simple. Communication from a third country's radar does not talk to the missiles that are built in India. So they've spent the last 6 months debugging each other, trying to teach somebody Hebrew to somebody's Hindi. So we have that conflict going on. I mean, I'm just kidding on the terms, but that's what is happening. That what the radar is telling the missile is not getting it. And what the missile is conveying, the radar is not getting it. So they've gone on this conflict for 2 years now. Over the last 6 months, I think it's gotten better. So some progress on it, but until you build your radar that talks Hindi to the missile that talks Hindi, you have a problem.
That's the other complexity, right? Because whatever you buy has to fit into that platform and an ecosystem. It has to talk to each other. And, small things like, let's say, not small things, perhaps, critical things like gauges and so on, they matter a big deal. And if you're just going to import something, stick a label and sell it, you're not going to be able to service it, maintain it, upgrade it going forward. Yeah, you want to
I was talking about mindset, right? I have some nice stories to kind of talk about.
Yeah, please.
So back in 2018, 2019, the two of us were actually, on roadshow mode. For us, roadshows were basically carrying our weapons from Unit A to Unit B and showing those weapons. And we would have army officers, some of whom are very different today from where they were then. And then we've had a few of them coming down and saying, SSS Defense has got a full name as well. And that's Stump, Schule and Somapa. Now, Stump and Schule happen to be Germans. But the moment they saw the German name, they said, oh, it's a German company. And the biggest mistake I did at that point in time was saying, no, we're not a German company, we're an Indian company, because that very moment, the emotions basically washed off their faces. So you see, mindset plays a very important role. That was a mindset then. Today, the same officers, over the course of time, would come back and then say, I'm proud of you guys. But they don't ever mention the German association anymore. They know we are a 100% Indian company. So mindsets are there. Mindsets are changing, but they're not going to change immediately. And why they will not change is because in India, we have, like I was talking about failures, we have, we tend to kind of make some of these foreign OEMs larger than life companies, right? And would I be prey to it? Of course, yes. Both of us actually work for GE at some point in time. To this day, if you kind of talk to us about GE engines, we just have good things to talk about.
Well, there have been failures too there at that end, but these are nice things.
Right? If you talk to us about Lockheed Martin, then we would say, yeah, contractor, but they came out with the stealth program, and the stealth program was possibly one of the most path-breaking programs to have come out of the US military-industrial complex, right? So we tend to glorify some of these guys to the point where they are so larger than life. They're almost like the Avengers. Right. And we're these little babies rolling around in our diapers here, trying to kind of, watch them and, hopefully become them one day. But it took us 7 years, and we were at Millipol, Paris the other day, last week. And as it happens in most of these shows, we've got competitors from HK, Beretta, the Israeli bunch come down to our booths. We generally casually, exchange, talk about not business, but we talk about products for the most part. And almost every one of those people came down, sat down with us. And at the end of it all, they said, you guys are doing far more work than all of Europe put together. Because Europe has been stuck in a rut.
Beretta. This was the main guy from Beretta. Yeah, so
Europe is stuck in a rut.
Right.
They've not done anything which is different either in terms of the product design, the industrial design of the product, or for that matter, making it more value for money. In fact, things have become more expensive. Things have got repackaged into some fancy programs, which, to the best of my knowledge, India thinks the world of, they don't think much about. For example, the next generation squad weapon program, the US Army is not happy with it. But if someone in India was to kind of talk about that, they would kind of make that out to be the next greatest invention after sliced bread, right? But it's taken us 7 years to get to this point. So you can expect what would be the mindset of people who are not in that space, who are not running around amongst the hounds in that particular space. We've been running around the hounds for the last 3 years at least, right? That's when we kind of started going international. But today we understand very well that the American OEMs are not what they make out to be, what we make them out to be. Sorry. And if you really need to kind of compete with them, what is required is, as a friend of mine would say, pitch में बैठना है बस, ठीक है? Run तो आएंगे, पर pitch में बैठना पड़ेगा, right? You can't sit on the pitch for 2 days and then say, boss, I've given up. It's not working out fine. You've got to be in the pitch. The runs will come, right? I think that's one of the biggest problems that we've got, that we kind of give up too quickly because of failures. A few companies which have actually stood the test of time, gone through failures.
Yeah, and they've all lasted.
They've all lasted. The guys who say, okay, you know what, I need quick successes. Let's find the next Israeli company who's got a good product. Let's bring that product down to India.
Sell it.
Let's repackage that, put that into a new packaging and then say made in India. 100% indigenization in 3 years. We're already at 70% indigenization when folks like us pretty much know that's absolute bullshit.
Nothing's going to come out of it.
Right. Bullshit is an understatement. I've got more obnoxious words to put at that. But I don't believe in that. And I don't believe that is right as well. And I think it is important for the government of India to call it out. I'm very happy that the Defense Secretary actually made use of the word screwdrivergiri.
Correct. And that's the right term. Most of that. Even that doesn't happen. But when that happens, there's some value that at least you learned assembly. I still don't diss that word out. That screwdrivergiri, like he says, sometimes helps people how to put three things together. It's like a kid putting a DIY unit. They do that, but
I don't have anything against screwdrivergiri as well, but I just don't believe in glorifying screwdrivergiri.
Don't do that. Don't say.
If it is screwdrivergiri, say it is screwdrivergiri. That's not a problem. But you're able to solve a problem today, and in due course of time, you will be able to kind of get better at that.
Scale up to make what you were using a screwdriver to assemble today, achievement. I'm saying significant, but again, same thing like you said, we were with a bunch of Europeans and everybody's claim to fame is they have a war going on in Ukraine. So mine is deployed in Ukraine. That's what you heard from them the first day, right? Mine tracks drones this way, mine see. And then we had a small team developing some cutting edge deep tech there in the same thing. So the Indian company doing some complicated stuff was the first day, but I think by the third day, everybody was there at the booth. They actually walked up to see what it was. So a lot of what they say and they claim, they come into Delhi, give you a few pamphlets. We are in Ukraine, we've been there, we've learned. No, it's not true. There is a lot of other things that the moment if you don't get cowed down or get taken by that colonial mindset that they can be better than us or they're always better than us, there are things that they also suddenly now realize that we're probably on par or better in certain things. A lot of things we did this time, we were much better than anybody there. As SSS defense, I think we were way ahead of most of the guys in the domains we were kind of occupying this
He's
time.
talking about a new division that we've had in the deep tech space. So what Dinesh is talking about is a new division of ours on the deep tech front. We started off, of course, yes, as a weapons OEM. And we just said, fine, we need to kind of migrate to where the rest of the world is heading towards, which is that we need to also be able to integrate sensors, have autonomous platforms, which can also be offensive weapons platforms. And that is where this whole idea started off about 2 years back. The way we decided to do it was, again, the way that we did for our weapon systems. We did not go across to an Israeli company or an American company and say, give us your tech. Of course, yes, we would still go back to an Israeli or an American company and say, give us some segments of that which will make the systems better, some elements which would make things better, robust, right? But otherwise, we just got hold of some really good Indians, people who had PhDs, who were working with the European Space Agency.
Got them back
in, gave them the right incentives, said fail. That's all. The only mandate was fail.
Just to interrupt him, we come back to the same story. We were the only guys who actually wanted to kill the drones using our guns. So it's always in our DNA. We need to shoot things down. It's not going to change. Again, it's in the DNA. It's always been with us that we need to see something broken into pieces. So to do that, we needed to build capability to first see the drone. Now, and that's how we got into building this division. So we need to locate a drone, track it, vector the weapon. Weapons anyway we had. We built the ammunition and the weapons to take drones down. So to vector it, we ended up building a sensor fusion system. So that's where the new one came in.
But you know what? That is what I'm saying. It is a little more difficult a path. It requires someone to be on the pitch a little longer. But if you're on the pitch a little longer, then the whole world is available for you to kind of chase. But otherwise, if you're kind of trying to get something from outside and you literally are hoping that that guy who's an OEM is going to give you the extra edge in war, it never happens. Never ever happens. Because incentives are very much skewed against it. The OEM never wants to part with technology. His whole business depends upon not parting with technology. His business depends upon making you part with your money. in return for him being able to sell you small elements of the technology which make you feel good, right? And well, yes, you buy into that whole logic. You also buy into it in the hope, and hope is one of the biggest problems here. You hope that fine, you will start the screwdriver giri, and in due course of time, you will start localizing and indigenizing and so on and so forth. But for even that to happen, you need to have a culture. An organization's culture has to determine whether you will say, enough is enough, now we need to start building. But by then, you've already signed yourself into certain contracts which would preclude you from doing many of this. We learned it the hard way much early in life. And I think a lot of companies in India, if you really need to be developing core technologies here, you got to start thinking about, not finding partnerships from outside and doing that, transitioning to India. Thankfully, that is where I think the nimble guys, the startups are doing very, very well, because they don't have this baggage. They're not thinking about next quarter's profitability. They're not thinking about how I can put out a news article because of which the exchanges will suddenly start giving me an extra 50% in value and so on and so forth. The smaller companies are not the least bothered about that. They're far more bothered about whether the tech can actually find customers, right? At least initially. And then what happens later on, once investors come on board, is that when they come under the pressure where the investors say, hey, listen, when is it that you're going to be able to show out a product? Right. So I think here today, we need to see a lot more of the startups. We need to see a lot more of the governments throwing crazy money at the startups. We also need to see the governments telling the startups, hey, listen, productionization of a lot of these systems will require you to work with the larger companies who already have the knowledge to scale things up. So now let's start creating an MIC together. And instead of trying to say, you are good, or, hey, you have a good product, I need to find out someone else who can kind of match up to your product, and therefore, I'll go tie up with XYZ. The best option is work together. Let's put out a whole platform that the rest of the world wants to buy from you. Everyone basically, gets a share of the pie, increase the size of the pie as against trying to fight with each other in India, right? The Indian market is going to be a market which on paper looks very, very beautiful. The reality of it is that it's a long gestation market in India for defense. With the lack of an ecosystem, it's going to take a much longer time as well. But the rest of the world is far more receptive to new ideas, new products. And that's the opportunity today. And many people are just not even looking at it.
Right.
And we know this today, that the rest of the world wants certain systems because they're not as ahead of us when it comes to
a lot of things.
Yeah, in a lot of things.
See, one of the things that happens is like Sindoor you talk about, right? I mean, I don't know, most of it is in public domain today, but a lot of drones that came in, we couldn't do much with it. We couldn't really do much with it because soft kill or electronic jamming can only take you so far. Right. And one other thing that happens when you're doing anything in electronic warfare is you always have, we call it ESM, the electronic support measures, or ECM, electronic countermeasures, or they add ECCM, countermeasures. So it's always a cat and mouse game that happens. So some jamming happens, they build a counter to that, build a support on the jamming, the drone becomes impervious to this frequency kind of thing. So for us, the confidence comes that you break the drone down. When we shoot it, you destroy it. There is no support, no counter support, nothing. On that premise is where the whole focus of the new division that we put is to detect. And detection is still ESM, is still electronic support measures. But we're not using electronic counter. We're going in to make sure we kill the drone with what we build. And that, there is no saying that we managed to bring it down softly, nothing like that. You eliminate the threat, and that's the premise that this whole process was built upon.
And the rest of the world is only catching up to that today.
So we wanted to lead that.
But, the opportunity in that for the global market is where we perceive a future for us. I think the defense MIC in India is slowly getting there. There are companies which are seeing far more of opportunities in export markets. The government of India is pushing for exports in there, which is a brilliant thing. I just wish that the government of India just starts thinking like one of those venture capitalist investors, throwing more money, right? You have to throw money. There is no question of budgeting it out, right? You got to start looking at this like, okay, I throw out $10 billion, right? I'll get zero out of this, but I'll get good platforms. And some of those platforms will come into the hands of private sector guys, because of which my armed forces will get better. And some startup companies will actually start seeing the light of day, and their, stature in the markets will grow. They won't have to depend upon standard venture capital, which is kind of trying to see if they can kind of sell off to the next investor, get a valuation bump, and so on and so forth. Many of these guys will live much longer. Because of that, the economy is going to see a longer term growth. And because of that, you will also see larger exports. So in 10 years' time, we will basically be where Serbia is today. If that is something that you can kind of look at as a vision, I think it's a very good vision.
Even if you look at, take simple things like small aircraft engines, right? We don't have a private aerosport culture in India. Like most of the things, we don't. There might be one odd guy who will buy an aeroplane, fly it for some time, like a Singania, put it in. But, pilot training, basic pilot training, we're ordering 1,000 planes. We barely have anything to fill the slots. Guys will all have to go abroad and do that, And the clubs are run by government. Regulations are so rigid that you can't do anything. We don't have an experimental aircraft system. So if there is impetus given to looking at certain core technologies that are like maybe 5-6 systems, sensors for one, engines for one, dedicated and budgeted for each one at a substantial value in short term, like in 5 years, you can start seeing massive upgradation coming through from a lot of companies. A lot of companies are risk averse. They have the capacity. It's not that they don't have the capability to build an aero engine. There are companies that can build, because we build millions of cars a year. We build millions of two-wheelers a year. And nobody can build a two-wheeler cheaper than what India can build today. I mean, including the Chinese can't build the quality and the cost that India builds two-wheelers today, and the efficiency at which we build. The capacity exists. It's just that whether the government is willing, because for a private entrepreneur, he does not see beyond a two-wheeler. But if the same guy said, you got 100 crores, you go ahead and build me a drone engine, and you don't have to worry about your sales on this investment, I'll give you 10 companies that can build drone engines in India. It's not going to be difficult. But that kind of impetus should come in from an agency or a government that can focus on dedicated platforms for dedicated applications. It does not have to be, just profit related or how the markets dictate what you do. Because markets dictate what you do, you build efficiency on what gives you revenues. This is about national security, which is beyond revenues. Until you know that national security is not something that you can put a price on, it's very difficult to take a commercial call on things like that.
So I want you to do a thought experiment, right? I mean, think from the other side of the table. You have to procure for the here and now, and perhaps a little later, right? The system is mired in bureaucracy, right? It's very opaque. Incentives are designed in such a way that, obviously the lowest priced equipment is given a weightage, right? How do you change this? And before you answer, I'll tell you a small story. A friend of mine in the Air Force was part of a pretty bad helicopter crash, right? And he got sent to Delhi after that. And he's sitting in with the babus on some of this procurement and stuff. And he said, I much prefer the helicopter crash. Right? He says it's just so frustrating because for him to change the smallest of smallest things, he has to file like 15, 20 of these papers, right? Convince this person that he's working with, who has absolutely no incentive to sort of look beyond whatever their scope of work is, right? Not even scope of work, their existing ways of doing things are. And I came out of that completely black-pilled, because imagine a guy who has had a pretty brutal crash saying that he kind of prefers being in some bed there rather than being sent to a post, somewhere in Delhi where he can actually, hopefully, do some more impactful things, right? So Vivek, think from the perspective of someone who has to procure, and this is the system that you have. How do you change this?
So I'll give you a statement of ours, which was taken very well by the officer on the other side, but it was politically incorrect and perhaps morally incorrect as well. So I guess we were having down about a drink, not more than that. And we had this general, extraordinary gentleman, very nice person. And I think it just slipped out of our mouths, both of us together. Sir, I think what you need to change is a war.
We need a war.
And he looked back and said, I agree with you. This was someone who doesn't want a war, but he knows for a matter of fact that what will change things is a war. And Operation Sindoor did prove it. I think certain things happened in the run-up to the war. Certain things happened post the conflict, where the exercise of standard caution was set aside, and the agencies all came together and said, we've got to find a way to equip the forces. Whether that stuff is available today in India or whether that's not available in India, if it's available in India, fantastic. And the fact that some of the systems that really saw success in the course of the war, where Indian gave even more confidence to the bureaucracy is also the politicians that, that is the right way to go. And you're seeing that. You're starting to seeing that as well. But my worry is that very soon we forget about this, and very soon we go back to locus standi as it was pre-Op Sindoor, and we start taking things casual. But I have very high confidence in the armed forces that I don't, think that is going to happen. I believe that they will be preparing for an upcoming conflict. If they're not preparing for an upcoming conflict, then let me not even go there. I know they're preparing for an upcoming conflict at some point in time, because there is no way after Op Sindoor that someone can kind of say, okay, fine, we've done the job, we've kind of scored a big hit, and now that's not going to happen again. It could happen again, and there's as much of a chance that it could get protracted.
But if I were to push you on that, right? I mean, what do you think is the timeline for?
I don't know, but it's going to happen for sure. I'm 100% sure. I don't even need. It could be 6 months. Yeah, we keep doing those wagers on a daily basis. How many months is it before we have the next conflict? I don't know when it's going to happen. We're not foreseers, we're not astrologers, we're not the guys who are going to be having crystal ball gazing as one of our capabilities, but I can tell you it is coming. I think there is no way that we can kind of prolong this sort of a uneasy peace, right? And so there will be conflict, and if there is no conflict, I'll be surprised. But I can be proved wrong. Let's not go there. My position again is this. Things changed because of Operation Sindoor. Certain decisions which were kept on the sidelines were not really exercised. All of a sudden just kind of got into action mode. Bureaucrats got into action mode. Politicians got into action mode. Armed forces bureaucracy, armed forces users started kind of asking for more. Many of them got what they wanted. And thankfully, a lot of that is continuing to happen because of emergency procurements and the likes. But we cannot have any restraint on this one because of the risk averseness, right? Bureaucrats have to continue to be the equivalent of how the Americans, more so the Americans, ran the World War II office of modernization and war efforts.
But while we talk about bureaucrats as well, right? I mean, again, like simply speaking from their perspective also, if something fails, right? It could be drastic for them, right? I mean, it could be CAG or CBI even investigating everything that they perhaps did, right? So what is the incentives for that person even to look beyond whatever is the usual, the norm?
Well, not everyone is the same. There are people, just as every one of us has different mindsets, different personalities. You'll find risk-averse guys here. You'll find risk-averse guys elsewhere as well. And you'll find guys who have, the chutzpah to kind of go out and then do what they want to do. So bureaucrats are no different. There are people who have the chutzpah and go out and do what they wish to do. So that's India for you. It's not a different. It's not any different. I mean, we're not a monoculture. We're not the same all across the board. We've got people who are willing to take the risk. The L1 issue is where I think things go in, and everyone expects that India wala saman hai to cheap rahega, but that does not happen. Let me be very candid here. We invest in R&D, right? That R&D has not only a cost of material; it also has a cost of people. We need to ensure that the people tool up, that the people train up, that we kind of pay them well. Just because of the fact that I'm an Indian, it does not mean I'm going to be giving cheap stuff to the army, because at the end of the day, the people who work with us, the technologists, are as much important for the armed forces and the Navy and the Air Force, right? If they don't kind of get paid well, if they don't have that economic growth, right, they're not going to be continuing to do development for any defense MIC in the future. So stuff is not going to be cheap. Stuff is going to be value for money, of course. And over the course of time, there will be life cycle cost savings. But for that, you need to have armed forces which are willing to take a bet. And I've been trying to kind of, both of us, in fact, I've been trying to hit our heads against people and say, stop this RFP related nonsense, actually start throwing out solicitations and then say, fine, I give you 6 months, show me results. If you can prove it, it's all yours.
So one of the things that happen, right, when you're writing an RFP, you're benchmarking the best in the world, correct? You're benchmarking a Heckler and Koch, or you're going to be benchmarking a Sig Sauer, right? So when I build the same weapon in India, I'm using the same material they're using because I have to benchmark that. So the cost of material worldwide is the same.
And you don't have the scale as well, right?
I don't have the scale. I don't even have access to a lot of it, right? Yeah. The only difference I have, right, is the component of labor, right? So if I'm looking at a guy UAW in the US, Auto Workers Union, average out about $30 an hour, $30 an hour. And say, for example, if I'm using that benchmark to build a gun, I put in, let us say, in the whole process, I put in maybe 30, 40 hours overall onto a weapon. So if I'm, looking at that as a ratio, as a cost ratio, I can only come down in that vertical where the man in the loop is involved, right? And that is going to be the only differentiator between me and a Sig Sauer. But then again, the other thing adds up. Those are countries that make their own machinery to make a lot of these stuff. We might have to import the machinery and pay a duty on it. So a lot of it get negated. We will almost be on par with each other on cost. The difference can be very minimal. But if somebody in Delhi expects that because it's made in India, it has to be significantly cheaper, is not going to happen. Because you're benchmarking the best in the world. Today our RFPs are written that if you put an American weapon to test on Indian RFPs, it won't qualify. It's that simple. You bring in the SIG and put it on an Indian RFP, it won't qualify.
Now we know that.
Now you
about the AK-203, the Russian one, the very famous AK-203 didn't qualify accuracy parameters in one of those trials very recently. And consider the fact that none of us have anything against the AK series of weapons. We've all loved the AK series of weapons. But I have a simple point to say. That's still a Russian weapon. Don't try to say that's an Indian weapon. Don't again give us this
even being a Russian weapon, it's still and having a pedigree that is unparalleled. There is no other weapon that has been built in that numbers. You still did not make the cut. And that's how strong Indian RFPs are written. They're written with head of, I can put it funnily, the best of everything in one go. You take the best of the SIG, the best of the HKs, the best of the FN, and the best of the Berettas, the best of the Russians, and write the RFP. Now, the kind of wall that you have to climb is inconsiderate at some point in time for somebody who has to build it, but that's the way you go into it.
But we bought peace with it as of today. I mean, we've competed in Make in India RFPs where we are the only Indian made weapon. The rest of the weapons are all foreign imported weapons. We've just bought peace with that, saying, fine, your foreign import weapons will come in and we'll try and make the best out of the situation. In some cases, we will win. In some cases, we will not. So be it. Right? But if you ask me as to whether I'm happy about the fact that the rest of the guys don't have to kind of walk through that same fire as us, well, I do have objections to it, but I've just bought peace with it. I bought peace.
So what happens? I mean, in peacetime, you can buy peace, but in war, you're not going to buy parts. It's not going to come to you. I mean, I've been emphasizing it over a period of time. You have conflict happening. Why are you making the emergency buy after Sindoor? Because during Sindoor, you couldn't get it. Now, even when you do an emergency procurement now, a lot of that won't come in for the next 5 years. So you're underprepared for the next 5 years. Whatever gaps you saw that day during Sindoor, right? To fill the gaps that the RFPs are going out today, your capability to fill that today will be 5 years from now.
Indigenized capabilities, I'm talking.
Indigenized. Not even indigenous. Why is you want to buy drones today, big drones that will stay in the air for 25 hours? Engines are not available till 2035. That's a problem. Engines are not available till 2030 for the small drones. You can still build the quadcopters on some small components and all, but the real capability, stay in the air for 20 hours, carry operations in the air, offensive operations, you don't have it. You cannot fill our attrition that happened, the ones we lost, we can't fill it for the next 5 years. So what is the EP doing? The EP will give you capability 5 years from now.
In many cases.
In many cases, yeah.
So how do we change these RFPs, right? Because I've worked on software RFPs with some of these PSU banks and other public sector undertakings and so on, and it's almost the same, right? They want everything, and it's an unbounded scope at a tenth of the price, right? And they'll give you penalties also in case you take longer, right? So it seems to be a common problem.
Roshan, I'm happy in a few things, right? For example, in our own space, one of the most recent RFPs which got concluded within a reasonable time of about 3 years was for the carbines, which was won by Bharat Forge for the most part, within a DRDO designed weapon, right? Of course, yes, the L1 price was such that it was quite low price, extremely competitive price. We would not be competitive at that level because of all the R&D that we've done on our own. But the fact is, yes, it's still an Indian company which has managed to get that, right? Going forward, the only thing I'm trying to say is this. RFPs are great when you want to match up with something which is already there in the market, right? And we're trying to ask a question here. There are so many defense items which you need, which are not there in this market today, which don't exist. How are you going to come up with an L1? If you don't have 3 people competing for something, and you don't have one, and you don't have that benchmarking and so on and so forth, RFPs basically get into cold storage. So I think that time has also come for us to now stop thinking for the most part about standard RFP processes, take that risk, identify, scout for technologies which can basically give you an edge, start incentivizing Indian companies by saying, fine, it does not matter, I don't care about an RFP, let's see if it is able to give us results. If it is able to give us results, not a big deal, I'll give you, let's say, a small quantity, 10 numbers, let's see how it works in the real world. If it's working in the real world, I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask you to kind of build up scale for us. That will give you the next 10 years worth of scalability. But otherwise, if you want RFPs and L1s, then God help us, we're not going to go too far off. That's my point. Go for RFPs with L1 when you have a bunch of things which are standard, which are comparable, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So in many cases, we've stopped doing the standard stuff, right? So we've released, the 300 Blackout Raptor. We're releasing certain products which are counter drone, hard kill solutions, and so on, which are not even there in the Indian market today. The only reason being, there is no option for us but to start looking at products which everybody else is going to be able to build. That's your key differentiator. But we also know, for a matter of fact, that when it comes to these L1 solutions on RFPs like this, we may not clear it because there is no other competitor in that space. At which point we want the government to say, guys, I take care of you guys. You do the building, right? So someone up there in the hierarchy, both at the armed forces bureaucracy level as also at the level of the Ministry of Defense, needs to start thinking about how is it I slot these oddball creatures. Right.
So like he said, and like the conversation we were having earlier, the entire R&D for the weapon that won the carbine tender was done by the government. The government invested money in maybe, I don't even know how many 100 crores, but through an agency called ARDE. ARDE spent, my guess, 25 years of R&D to arrive to that final form. The company that won the R&D, won the tender, did not build the weapon. ARDE transferred the weapon to the company to bid into the process. So the entire hand-holding on the program for small arms was funded by the government through a government agency. R&D was done. The weapon was proven over a period of extended period without nobody asking them what the end deliverable or what the cash flow was or what the profits are. It was driven by the government through a government agency and finally handed over to a private enterprise to take it forward. Now, that is the same structure that needs to happen, but not through R&D, through a government agency. It would not take 25 years if it was done by a private team. A qualified private team could have done the same thing in 3 years. So that's the difference. And that's the same kind of impetus and push that the government needs to come into in policy for aero engines, for battle tank engines, for everything that we need. For engines on the ships that we have, we don't have the play. We need to bring all the 3 services to build capability.
Thank God that it was an Indian company and an Indian design weapon which won that.
Yeah.
If it was to be an Arab company, the 2 of us were planning on leaving India. Actually planning on leaving India. I wouldn't joke about this.
That was something that we had contemplated at some point.
But why do these trials take so long? I mean, 4 to 7 years, and multiple agencies, 3, 4, 5 agencies involved, and so on. I understand these are sophisticated weapons, obviously, and there's a lot at stake, right? Like you say, I mean, if a rifle has to fire 10,000 times, it has to function, right? So, but why?
So, a slight difference here. So, when they write the RFP, they will want it to run like a horse, carry an elephant load. They do that first. First of all, that barriers are so high. And then we want to make the horse run in Rajasthan and at 50 Celsius. We want the horse to climb 16,000 feet and go to minus 50. Now, you tell me who on the earth will do this? And this is something that because there is a scared bureaucrat there, who does not want to take the risk of saying, I
wants to cover his bases.
So he's going to put you through all the hoops so it doesn't affect him. So you are going to be fighting weather, elements, all the other things that go in multiple environments and multiple climes. They say, do rainwater. One of the first things I think our teams built here was we had to simulate rain in the Northeast. So it's very funny that we have a chamber where we have 20 shower heads pouring water down while the guy is firing, just to simulate the Northeast. So cold chambers where you put the weapon for 3 days at minus 50, then you pull out and fire. So you build and simulate. You can do it here, but for some reason, they've not evolved into that. They will want you to wait till it's monsoon in Arunachal Pradesh and then send you there. Or they will tell you to go to another place in Tawang when it's snowing and fire there. When you can do everything in one controlled environment, do all the tests you want, clear it in 3 days, no, it becomes 3 years.
See, there's one about timing. There is the other angle, right? I'm just giving the example of something that we know of. There's one RFP that we've been engaged on for 7 years now. 7 years now. I mean, it's come in multiple forms and gone in multiple forms. In the course of that same weapon, we've already exported outside. And I have 3 European countries basically who've come down and who've expressed an interest in buying them for their SWAT teams, police forces, squad sniper roles, and so on and so forth. We're happy about the fact that we're getting some of those opportunities. Very, very happy about the fact that we're getting those foreign opportunities. What we're not actually very excited about today is that there is an Indian company which has developed the IP, which has managed to kind of, go through this whole process of building it, is fielding an Indian weapon, and then we've got to compete against foreign-made weapons in trials. Like I said, bought peace with it. But that doesn't mean that is right. I believe it is wrong. I mean, if you want to have everyone else competing on the same platform as a made in India weapon, then have the gumption to kind of bring in an Indian manufactured weapon. If we can do so, the other guys can do so as well. Similarly, there are many other areas where we've got Indian companies which have actually developed indigenous R&D. I know of stories where the guys would sell this across to a foreign company and that same thing would be
coming back
to India at double the price.
Wow.
Right? So there have been multiple instances where Indian companies have actually felt that we are not given our dues. Is it wrong for us to kind of state that? No. I think the reason why we are stating at this point in time is because we've earned the right to say it. But several companies in the past, especially the ordnance factories and the likes, don't deserve to say this because they've not done their stuff. See, it's the same as, a parent could be, harsh on a child, but once a child who's actually said, fine, I'm deserving of this one, then the parent has to recognize it. And the only way he can recognize it, in effect, is by giving them due respect and that opportunity to have their say in critical matters. Right? Now, that's where I have a view here that we have to get out of that mindset where we say, no, I'm going to have a fashion contest and I'm going to try and make sure that all of you guys in an RFP will compete with each other and all of you guys will be at par with each other and the best one will be shortlisted. Right? We have a different view. Our view is, if we are good enough, take us out. Right? You don't even buy it. Take 20 weapons of ours, take it right into the borders, right? Start using it. If you like it, come back and tell us what you like. If you don't like certain things, come back and tell us what you don't like. We'll see what we can do. But that ought to be the first preserve of an indigenously designed, developed and manufactured weapon. We should not have to compete with foreign weapons if there is a past track record of actually putting out a good weapon and getting into international markets. That's our position. It's protectionism, bang on protectionism. The Americans do protectionism. I don't care one bit if the Indian government needs to take on that position. You've got tariff wars with the Americans. What are you trying to fight for? You're trying to fight for respect on the table today. We're trying to fight for respect on the table today. And I think it's a very fair position.
A lot of these negotiations are also like completely lopsided, right? It's almost like, what's yours is ours, what's mine is mine,
There is no negotiation, right? And there are guys who say, we don't even want to come to India now. In a lot of weapon systems, they say, come to our range, you test and you go back. We're not bringing it to India. There are enough people who are going to do. Someday we're going to do that too. I mean, it's not that there's nothing wrong with it, because when you build capability and you're confident, come to the center, not run hoops over 20 places. So, and they wouldn't tweak a single thing for us. They wouldn't tweak anything for us. It doesn't matter whether it goes high, hot, whatever else it does, they wouldn't tweak it for you. You learn to use it, you shut up and use it and go about life. Nobody is going to come back. I mean, for the last 40 years, we've had a sniper weapon in this country, in the armed forces, that does not use even a basic bipod. I mean, a hunter uses a bipod today. And we've spent 40 years in combat, in frontline forces who have used weapons that cannot take a scope on it, that cannot take a bipod on it. You keep it on a stone.
You can't fit it?
No, you can't fit it. It does not have options. We've happily lived with that because somebody shouted down our throat.
That's what happens when you're dependent upon foreign OEMs. You don't go and evolve to that point, right?
You can't ask him and he's not going to give you. He says, this is it. And we've happily lived with it.
And you asked us a question about bureaucrats and, why would he do that if he's kind of, I'll tell you the other story of ours. We've had multiple state governments in India. Our products not only go to the armed forces, they also go to the state governments today. Police forces. Special forces, SWAT teams, special task forces. In the last 3-4 months, we've won a lot of contracts with the police forces. The police forces are actually enforcing the Make in India doctrine there. They said, fine, bring your Indian weapon, that's it. I'm not going to give you an end user certificate to bring in a foreign weapon. I'm not going to give you end user certificates to bring in ammunition for a foreign weapon and then basically take 3 months of my time and thereafter waste our time here to do trials, another 6 months gone in the course of that, then questions being raised and so on and so forth. They say, fine, this is your weapon. I'm going to test it the way that the Indian Army does it. I'm going to test it the way the Ministry of Home tests it. If you clear it, great. We'll put you through the process of an RFP. Fine. And I'll close things out in the course of 3 to 6 months. Efficiency. So government can be efficient. Russian government can be extremely efficient. But what we are trained to see is always a negative news in the market, negative news in media saying that the government is not efficient. I am actually of the view here that the current government and multiple state governments, multiple paramilitary forces, army, bureaucracy can be extremely efficient. I'm 100% confident about it. I just don't believe here that too many cooks are good.
Do you think the DRDO can be a little more collaborative on that front? Because when we think of, let's say, ISRO, right? I mean, they're super collaborative, right? I mean, they let startups use their facilities, right? They help them liaise with the government. And this has been a game changer, right? I mean, if you look at the number of space startups that have come out, Agnikul, Pixel, all of these, all world class. So do you think that DRDO could do
It is. The DRDO is now one of the most collaborative agencies with the private sector. We collaborate with the DRDO. We've had a very good experience of collaborating with the DRDO. ARD collaborates with us in multiple projects. We've given them certain capabilities as well, which they're happy to kind of, work with us on because we're fast, we're nimble. They see results coming out of it.
So they don't gatekeep.
They
don't gatekeep in some sense.
They do that. They do that to a certain extent because it becomes a peer-to-peer review. They do that. It's also that brings them into scrutiny, like a lot of times. But they also realize one thing, that the private industry brings efficiency. So, somewhere it's a trade-off that even though you are under scrutiny, you also bring in the efficiency and, might make it a better bet to work with a more efficient process than, how DRDOs work. It's always result oriented. You need to deliver things on a time. bound to deliver programs at certain quality and timelines. So they find that, but it's a slow opening. They're also learning the ropes. We are learning how to work with them. But at some point that they can catalyze, they will have the capacity to work more efficiently with us.
I think from 2020, right, we've heard of this. The Prime Minister himself gave the slogan of Atmanirbhar Bharat. After that, we had this Defense Acquisition Council. Then there was IDEX. All of these things have happened. And while the intention is there, maybe the execution has fallen short by a little or by a lot. I mean, you guys will know, right? So if you wear the policy hat, what is one thing that you guys would change? I mean, maybe you can take turns, right? One thing you would change from a policy perspective and one thing you would.
So Atmanirbhar Bharat should be Atmanirbhar Bharat, right? You cannot have Atmanirbhar Bharat as a label or a sticker. I can't buy Israel and put Atmanirbhar Bharat on it. If it has to be Atmanirbhar Bharat, it has to be here, made here by us, right? Might not be the most efficient one, but it has to be made by us. And ultimately, you will get to the point. I mean, if the Israelis are doing 100 and I'm doing 90% of it, it will take me 2 more years to get there. But then it has to be made here. I cannot, because it's easy and they are willing to hand on something, bring it up and put, part of Atmanirbhar Bharat. It's not going to help. We have to do.
Well, it's a very difficult problem as well, right? Because a lot of these needs are very, it's expedient, right? Like you said, I mean, we could face a...
Oh, hold on. If it's expedient, buy. If it's expedient, don't even come across and say Atmanirbhar
Bharat. Buy and build capable. I'll give you a simple thing, right? Okay. Let's go back. I mean, because Vivek mentioned the Navy is the most efficient. Localized, a lot of it they've done. I mean, no doubts about it. It's a lot less riskier than an aeroplane because, you can actually stop a ship and you won't fall down. You can't do that with an aeroplane. You'll have to bring it down. But with a ship, I can anchor it or I can just go down to throttle and stay there. I'm not going to sink. So the simple things like that is, all right, you have top of the line. Today they cost $600 to $1 billion to build a capital warship, right? Wait, that's what it costs to build a destroyer. It'll be anywhere from 600 million to, and we pay the Israelis just for the radar close to 150 million, and the Americans for the engines another 50 million. So there's a lot of components on it. Only the metal is localized, networking, XYZ, various things are done, but there's still the eyes of the ship or the radars which we buy off the Israelis. Though Bell says that they will service it, it just comes in a box. GE gives the engines in a box. Vattasila from Finland gives them the engines in a box. Now, we have Kirloskar, we have Cummins, we have 100 guys, right? So build smaller ships. You might not want to go expeditionary, but coast patrol, you need to build on that capability with local engines. They might, and learn from that how does seafaring work on local engines, what kind of weathering is needed, how do you take it forward? I think someday on a casual day, I'd sketched it to somebody and I said, just put 2 small air defense radars on a metal platform with a few Kirloskar engines and you already have control of 100 square kilometers. It's easy. You don't have to really go back and wait for $1 billion piece of equipment. But you start learning. You start learning. 4 diesel engines on it from Kirloskars. We'll turn it at 25 knots, not at 30 knots. And 2 simple radar systems that are built by LRD can go on. But it still gives you a certain area control. Not wait for 10 years to build a capital ship. Build this by the year and learn by the year. And make sure everything here is made in India. Until you get to that point, you're not going to learn anything. It's not...
But what amazes me at some time are people who say, no, we cannot have anything but for the best for the army. Then in that case, why are you even having L1? So the army also, and the guys who actually speak on behalf of the army, not the army. The army is very, very...
They're practical, right? Obviously.
Very practical. Yeah. They understand, we got to live with this thing. But there are some guys who actually speak on behalf of the army and say, no, we need to have the best, we need to have this. My only point is, why even have L1 in that case? If Indian companies are incentivized, whereby the economic benefits of product development stays inside the country, right? Even if it is 90% of something, or 90% of a base case, for example, you've already got an existing system, measure up Indian products against an existing system and then see how it works.
Look at the best case that you had, test it against the best case you have, and buy the Indian one. That's the whole.
And then in 3 years' time, those guys will actually give you better than what the rest of the world has, because that's what happens when you give, that incentive to Indian companies to start building. Right. And we're starting to get a lot of that incentive to building, because there are at least about 4 or 5 police forces, 2 to 3 international forces, which are giving us an impetus to build. And we're happy about that. For us, the Indian armed forces are always going to be a matter of pride. But then, yes, we've also got to survive, and we've got to kind of find customers whom we can service and make them very happy. That's the whole story today as far as defense MIC is concerned. Every single company wants to make their customers happy. Some guys want to make their customers happy by doing original work. Some guys want to kind of take a foreign product, put in a few parts together, put out an lion sticker in there, made in India. And you know what they say? It's what you do when no one is watching that determines your true character.
That's the point.
Right? That's what I'm trying to tell you. The defense MIC in the next 10 years will actually throw out some of those companies off the idea of an angle.
Go away. A lot of them will vanish.
Right? A lot of these guys will vanish. Because the government is also coming to see the truth.
One of the things that got evolved was also because of a war. The Sindoor showed a lot of guys in their true colors. A lot of them did not work or did not perform the way it was meant to perform, and the countries that gave them just decided to turn them off. So things that we bought from other countries during conflict can just turn off. GPS kits can just be removed off the link up. You can't do anything. So talking about localizing some of these things, Atmanirbhar kind of concepts. One really nice use case is that Americans had given the South Koreans the best spy ships to monitor North Koreans. And North Korea, being in sanction, really did not have the capacity to go at these ships. But desperate times, desperate measures, they mounted 2 battle tanks on 1 fishing trawler, took it and blew up the Korean ship, the South Korean ship. They just put 2 tanks on a fishing boat, took it to the waters. These guys never expecting a battle tank or a boat. And the guys opened fire and sank the ship. So, but then, that is the kind of, it might sound jugaad, but these are the building blocks that actually can give you, capability. Navy has a weapon called the SRGM today. We got a TOT from Italy. We've spent 20 years after the TOT and not built a single system. Not kidding on it. 76 weapon. We have 20 years ago, we got the TOT. We've not put together a single system completely. We still have bits and pieces of the system, but the whole system on its own, 20 years later, we've not been able.
If we had the TOT, it would take us about 3 years. We would have built up the next round and next evolutions of the same weapon, knowing that by now we understand a lot of things about weapons and ballistics.
The other funny part happens, right? When you talk about Atmanirbhar, right? It's a great slogan. Now, for example, he says that qualifying benchmark, right? So there are some benchmarks you can set against anybody, right? On certain small systems, but on the bigger systems, we've never built them to build a benchmark. We have to start from somewhere. But to start from somewhere, we don't have any agency that can qualify the weapon. What should the weapon do? How should it perform? We've never evolved into technology at that level. So, and the guy who gave you the TOD gives you some standard documents which they have no clue on. It's not a part of your requirement. Your requirement has to be north, south, east, west, all kinds of environments. You never built for it. So either you can go back and say, this is what the TOT original thing does, can it do? Or you write a very complex RFP where you go through so many zones, but you don't even know how to test on those zones. Sorry. That's where it comes to.
What can we learn from ecosystems elsewhere? Because a bunch of these are solved problems, right? I'm sure that Israel or Turkey or the rest of them would have solved it and would have faced these problems in their own ways and solved it. So what can we learn from, let's say, Israel, which has a super existential threat, right? And it's in a state of war perennially.
What you can learn from Israel? Yeah. Create a super existential threat.
No, that is in policy. But how does the Israel induct systems, right? So if there is 10 American systems, right? 3 or 4 guys will carry the Israeli systems along with the squad. So that's how they build experience and capability, right? So if there is 9 people in a squad, the guys are carrying, say, there'll be 1 American machine gun and 1 Israeli machine gun in the squad. And over a period of time, the Israelis get comfortable with their weapons, they start removing the American systems out. So that's the way our guys should start inducting.
The other interesting thing about Israel is that Israel is such a small country, but they've developed a very solid ecosystem in certain areas. For example, electronics, electronic warfare, drones, counter drones, may not be so much on aerospace, but a lot of very, very highly fast-paced, evolving sectors. They've managed to kind of put out some really interesting products. That's also come because of their system whereby they groom guys immediately after school and college to kind of be participatory members of the military forces. And some of those guys who kind of are part of some elite groups like the 8200 go back, join hands with their seniors, their co-workers, create new companies. Those new companies basically integrate with other larger OEMs to kind of scale production of those products. We've had instances when we go across to 3 Israeli booths and we see the same product in this guy's booth painted white, this guy's booth painted black, right? You wouldn't see that very often in India, right? So it's that way of working with each other, saying, hey, listen, we've got this product, let's go out and sell this to the rest of the world, let's make great business out of it, right? So they are also looking at business. They're trying to kind of work together to capture a larger chunk of the global marketplace. And we're starting to get there. We're slowly starting to work with companies which have a similar mindset like ours, where original R&D is priced, where we understand that, there is evolution as far as a product is concerned. And then we're trying to kind of work jointly with each other to kind of go into foreign markets. For example, at Millipol Paris, we're about 3 to 4 Indian companies, and we all know each other. We all know what each other's strengths are. All of us carried indigenous products. Otherwise, we would not be in foreign expos at all. I would not be able to, repackage a foreign product and take it into an international show, international audience. It's not allowed.
The collaborator would not allow you to do that. So you have to be your own.
So we're getting there. There are other examples of countries. For example, Serbia is one of those countries which is very headstrong. So their advantage is that they're headstrong. And they understand very clearly that the Americans will not stand up for them. They know that the Russians will not stand up for them. So they kind of stand up for themselves. And the way they do it is that they capitalize upon their skilled labor force, which is basically fought multiple wars in the past. And they keep incentivizing that group to come out with new products all the time. The government has a rule stating that if you have a new product and you're going elsewhere with that particular product, we'll come chase you right after that and make sure that you offer that product first.
To Serbia.
Yeah. Right? And so that's another side of it that says, boss, you have a good product. I want to be the first person to be actually evaluating that product and seeing whether that has material value for our armed forces. Then you have, I'd say what we have to learn a lot from are the Chinese and the Turkish, right? Completely different mindsets. You can't replicate that mindset in India. And I'll be very honest, it is not worth it, right? But you have to learn some aspects from them. The Turkish have built such a phenomenal military industrial complex in there today. You have the government which basically tells them, you build up this product, you export this product, I'll incentivize you, I'll give you a subsidy, right? And you guys can go out and sell it to the rest of the world. Whether that's the drones, whether that is the rifles, whether that is the
armored personal
carriers, whatever that is, right? And they put out stuff which is not so great, right? A lot of our products are going to be better than the Turkish and Chinese products, no doubt about that. We'd never be able to compete with them on price because of the fact that the government is subsidizing this industrial complex in such ways it's unheard of, right? The rest of the world just simply looks at them and says, what in God's name is happening in there, right? And we look at them and say, I can't compete with you guys, right? But they're flooding the market. And there are some guys who will actually want something like that. Now, you know what happens in India? This is a very interesting case. And it's an actual case in point. you have the Ministry of Defense, you have the Ministry of Home, you have the Ministry of Commerce, you have the Ministry of Finance, right? They all are interested in furthering the case for Atmanirbhar Bharat. That is a unanimous position I take, because the politicians, the administration, the government, the cabinet, the ministries are all interested in furthering the case for Atmanirbhar Bharat. But something funny just comes in, and none of this is because of bad intentions, right? The most recent GST change, and along with that, there was a change as far as customs duties were also concerned. It reduced the GST on components and parts of weapons, rifles, certain other products as well, to something like about, 12% or 5%, whatever that is. Immediately after that, the customs duties on components and parts of rifles came down to 0. Right? And here the two of us are scratching our head and saying, good Lord, tomorrow you can have companies in India which can import Turkish-made components, right? Which are dirt cheap, by the way, right? And if you've got a problem with Turkey, that's perfectly all right. Turkey will send this across to a NATO country and the NATO country will give it to you.
It's simple. They send it through UAE, ideally.
Or they could send it even through a NATO country, by the way. And then you have those components finding their ways into Indian rifles, Indian rifle makers assembling those components put together and saying Atmanirbhar. But until a few days before that, the customs duty was applicable. But today you have 0 customs duty, which means that the components become even more cheaper.
Well, that's crazy, right? Why?
That's crazy, right? You know what? I don't think it was a bad decision or it was a badly intended decision. It was just a decision that for us seems counterproductive for true Atmanirbharta, which is to do with R&D in India, manufacturing with Indian technological talent, coming out with products which are good for India, which are good for the world. Now, what also happens because of that, and thankfully that is what kind of keeps the two of us a little happy, is that there'll be more Indian companies which, in the rush to try and see how they can kind of do the screwdriver-giri, will end up importing badly made components, but cheap components. And there will be more foreign OEMs who will never give you the technological know-how or the technological know-why, which means that they will still continue to be formally, officially, and lifelong dependent upon their foreign OEMs, which means evolution is going to be difficult. So we said, okay, fine. What is it that we as a company have to be looking at? We've got to look at evolution. We've got to look at products which are not going to be part of the regular run-of-the-mill systems that someone else gives you. Look beyond. Expand your horizons. Start looking at products which are not there, but which are slowly trying to find their way into multiple militaries, be it new calibers, be it freshly designed products, and so on and so forth. So, do you think that all of this was intended to kind of help indigenous development? I don't think so. It was actually done so that you could bring down the cost, bring down the availability of products in India in a particular space. But in the course of all of that, what you've actually done is you've kind of made foreign OEMs the real, dictators in all of this. Because now Indian OEMs will say there's always going to be more economics, buy the cheap parts, put together a weapon and sell to whomsoever you want to sell to. What is the point of doing any R&D in India? What is the point of doing any manufacturing in India when you're going to get dirt cheap products from outside? Dirt cheap components from outside. Don't even invest in actual process.
It's like the EV markets today, right? Some motors come from China, batteries come from Taiwan, drivers, and other things come from some other company. So you could be sitting in 1,000 square feet facility, putting together two-wheelers, and that's what is happening. But you don't know how to maintain them. They break down. You got to just let them go. So the real guys like an Aether or somebody who's done groundbreaking work and taken it forward is the guys who will continue sustaining it. But then for that, it takes effort, time, investments. The same thing happens but a lot of these guys will not exist beyond a year or 2 years. They make their quick buck. Saturation happens. They disappear off. But you'll be left holding the baby, which has no bearings on. So, two-wheeler, you can park it on the road, go home. You can't be in a battle and your gun jams. You got to make sure that quality is made. You can't be flying and expect the engine to go kaput. No, you can't. So it's very critical that MIC standards, way superior standards, need to be maintained for it to sustain. Because these are all, situations where people's lives are involved. Just because a soldier signs up to go to battle does not mean he needs to die. It's very critical that you got to make sure that every bit of equipment on him functions the way it's meant to function in all environment conditions. So it's very critical to maintain that quality standards.
Let's take a little bit of a tangent and talk about product innovation here, right? One of my favorite podcasts over the last year was watching this guy, Paul Malaki of Handural, talk about all of the cool stuff that they've developed, right? I mean, VR headsets that gives you vision to see behind doors and coordinate with teams and so on and so forth. What's like the really cool stuff that's coming up?
Cool from us or cool from across?
In general,
I think
weaponry.
Well, slowly we're moving from kinetic to energy-based weapon systems.
So you'll have to explain that.
Okay. So we're moving away from bullets hitting you to microwave systems, high-frequency microwaves shaking your internal organs, or lasers blinding you out or causing burn injuries. And so much faster, because you don't need to cycle around, eject nothing. You can put a beam on and go on multiples. So innovation in weapon systems will move from kinetic, but kinetic will remain because it's not going to change. Because the energy factor on kinetic weapons is a lot more efficient than energy-based weapon systems. They're still ungainly, big and crude at this point. They'll get sophisticated, but that is the going forward in weapon systems. Sensors, fusion, networking, a lot of it happens. It does not have to just be Andural's thing giving you, it's simple things like a sniper sitting down can use the same thing to get a 360-degree view on him on locations, or a battle tank guys going out can get the same view Andural talks about. The point is a lot of AR, VR systems have been developed by third parties out of the purview of Andural, companies like that. What they've done is they've utilized and they built definitive systems to utilize information coming in a certain way. And that's what is the capability. Like, for example, if you take our anti-drone systems, we're building 360 degrees capabilities to sniff out signatures of the drones. We don't really need to be looking up and turning 360 around. I mean, sensors that are being deployed currently can sniff out drones in any direction. In a given bubble, it can do lat-long alt, latitude, longitude, altitude of the income, component. But then again, how you use it is what matters. I mean, how agile is your software? How quick you can vector it, how good is your drives that can bring to bear on it. So there is the same innovations happening that happens in, air and space on ground too. But these are less glamorous. We're not in cover pages of any magazine. You don't see a fast moving aircraft. But, you also know that you can track that same aircraft and shoot it down in what we do. So that's the difference.
And there are some other interesting things also which are happening. I think one of the most interesting things in the course of the next few years would be certain companies which are actually able to do indigenous sensors.
Localized, yes.
Right. There are a few companies which have come out of the IIT Madras incubation setup, working on system on chips, both commercial and which also can see defense applications. May not be the most glamorous items, but some of these things can be brilliant. My personal view again is that guys who've been making drones will slowly die away. But the guys who are actually making the electronics in those drones, and electronics being capable of not being jammed, electronics which are capable of
being robust enough
to sustain. For example, in the Russia-Ukraine conflict today, it's literal jugaad which is happening. But let's say the conflict ends tomorrow, the next step would be to kind of make militarization of those low-end drones, right? In India, people tend to kind of look at drones as being like a fancy stuff, but I think in the future, it's not going to be the airframe, it's not going to be the rotors, it's not going to be the motors. It's really going to be about the electronics in those drones. And some companies are working on that space to kind of get rid of the Chinese, component supply chain, sort of a slavish mindset today. That is going to be a big addition as far as Atmanirbhar Bharat success is going to be concerned.
Ukraine, if you take Ukraine, right, and tomorrow if Starlink turns it off, that war is over. It's not such a big deal to close that war. All you need is to Starlink to cut the links. The drones will come down. The capability is being built exponentially because of Starlink. Now that is the kind of capability India needs. My guess today, we have about 12 reconnaissance satellites carrying transporters that can actually link communication to drones, which is an extremely classified space. But it's still extremely regulated and controlled. You can't even test your drone with an Indian link because they won't give access to your link. So people kind of tend to put one of their drones much higher than needed and then use that as an uplinking device just to prove up, showcase technology. But at a point where you can democratize communication and sensors like what Starlink can do is what is going to change the way the drones fly, the drones operate. Range becomes unlimited. Today you're currently saying I'm good at 50 kilometers, I'm good at 100 kilometers. But if your uplinking is so good like what Starlink does, I could fly my drone sitting in Bangalore out of Delhi. I don't have to be in Delhi. I could do it wherever I want, on whichever border I want. That quantum and exponential capability is what we need to build at some point and not depend on any regulatory Chinese uplinking tools. These are exponential technologies that will change the way wars are fought.
India typically leapfrogs technology cycles, right? I mean, like, for example, mobile adoption picked up way faster than, let's say, PC adoption. So you think some of these new sort of greenfield avenues are where our opportunity lies in terms of actually building world-class stuff and exporting it outside as well?
Our opportunity lies everywhere. You have, let's kind of put the stats out, right? The sheer number of people who've left India and gone across to foreign companies to build technologies in there, count them, you'll find plenty. The sheer number of Indians who kind of going into IITs, IIMs and other places and coming back and working for a consumer company. Lot of them, right? A lot of people in the future are starting to move into product companies. A lot of people are trying to move into defense today because of the fact that there is an opportunity in there. But it's a product related opportunity in there. It's very different from services. So I am of the view here that there'll be a lot more of people going into manufacturing. We have the labor force. We've got the technology talent. What we need is a training and incubation hub, so to speak. That is what I'm positive about. So I don't actually believe that the opportunity lies only in drones or electronics. I believe the opportunity lies across the space. It lies on, in making better weapons, better sensing for weapons, better remote platforms of weapons, better autonomous platforms of weapons, better surveillance systems, better ISR systems, better aircraft, better engines, better naval engines.
Everything.
Good Lord, I'm going to go on.
You can go. No, but when you brought up the 5G story, right, that we only learn to use technology. The antennas still come from Ericsson. We don't build a single 5G antenna in the country. Everything is proprietary Ericsson. We buy it and we put it and we deploy it because the base is 1 billion people using 5G network. We can't put a small 5G network for 5 kilometers. In fact, this is the first time he saw in his life what a controlled 5G network is a few days ago. He had no clue on what it could actually do in a given space and time. So we have not built the hardware. We don't know how to make it work. We don't know how to make it talk to each other. But when somebody makes it do that, then we know how to use the tool. We've neither done the user interface, which are the phones, nor have we done the networks. The networks are either still controlled by Qualcomm or Ericsson. CDMA is owned by Qualcomm. The 5G systems are all Ericsson, leased to Chinese, and China built on it. Huawei now can build their own networks. So same thing like that. We need to get to that point where we build our network. We build the hardware that broadcasts in 1900. hertz speed or 900 to 1600 hertz. We need to be able to generate that waveform, put the wave out, receive the wave. Till we do that, we will still be a services provider.
Fundamental building blocks is where we need to kind of invest more time.
We don't have it. You need to come back to build it. I mean, it's a simple, small thing to put out a 5-kilometer radius and secure communication. Companies sitting on our homes do it internationally. This company that had done that little kit might not even be a 50-man company. But they put together the kit. Now that is where we got to start coming in. Otherwise, we buy somebody's kit and put it and use whatever else we do.
So as we come to the end of the podcast, we've spoken a fair bit about policy, what measures, what interventions, and so on. Let's assume this episode travels up, right, and reaches the powers that be. What is like a single takeaway that you would like to offer to like a policymaker?
Well, at my first point, I think initially itself was the government at some points, at some levels, needs to start thinking more like a risk investor, like a VC. And it's not that they can't. We know for a matter of fact that when Parikar sir started off as Ministry of Defense, he had a technology team, he had a bunch of people who could advise him. And some of those initiatives in the early stages were basically intended to bridge the gaps. Some of the other initiatives were intended to kind of look at a longer term vision. A lot of that DNA still is there in the Ministry of Defense, is still there in the Ministry of Home, multiple other ministries which are kind of looking at tech. It is basically about catalyzing that energy into being a risk investor, number one. The Israelis did that beautifully, right? For years together, the government has been hand in glove with the industry there to function like a risk investor. Okay. I think that is one. Second is, don't actually fall prey to making Atmanirbharta at any cost. Right? Yeah, don't make it just a pure slogan. And how is it that the government can actually understand what is happening? You can understand what is happening when the people in the armed forces, people in the bureaucracy are told, go out and then see what the guys are doing. Right? So like you have, guys going out and then scouting for footballing talent. Let people in the government go out and scout for defense talent. What's wrong in that? That's, if you ask me, one of the simplest things for government agencies, divisions within the armed forces to do. And the army actually does have an Army Defense Bureau, which does some of that. But what they don't do is at the same time serve as a risk investor as well. So I think that time has come when we kind of stop having, I do this part, then you do the next part. Because when you hand over to somebody else, then it just falls apart there. Let a DARPA be a DARPA, right? If you want to try to imitate a DARPA in 3 agencies, it will not help.
Can merge them together.
Yeah. Honestly speaking, there is no harm in throwing money, provided you know what tech the guys are working on. If you don't understand what tech they're working on, then you've got problems. It's important for the government to actually get a little nimble in these particular respects, because this is a matter of national security. It'll make the difference between losing the lives of several thousand people versus taking the lives of several thousands of your enemies and causing the end to war. It will. Because asymmetric advantages have to be played upon. I believe today that having a better weapon, people kind of tend to talk about weapons as being dal chawal. No, none of us actually believe it is dal chawal. If we have a weapon which is a special forces weapon that we built, which has got the cross section, which is much smaller than the standard weapons you guys use, but at the same time is able to cause more damage at the terminal end, that is asymmetric warfare, because there won't be anyone else. Coming 100 meters away, they would want to be 200 meters away.
So you put the distance. So it's a constant in air combat. The more the distance you can kill the other guy, the better. So whatever gives you that advantage, more kinetic energy at a longer distance, a lighter weapon, a more stealthy weapon, right? That's asymmetric.
So asymmetric warfare, sorry for stopping you there. Asymmetric warfare has to be a division in itself. Anything to do with asymmetric warfare, whether that is land warfare, whether that's counter drone or drones has to be taken up by the armed forces and also the government, like the kind of building up a top quality football team. Find the scouts, let them run amok, find the guys doing the job, bring them into the fold, be a risk investor, and then don't bother about the results. Results will have to come.
You got the process right, they will come. It's not such a difficult thing. It's just that they need to be more focused on the places they're looking for talent and the people. It's also not difficult for them. They have all the information. They're the ones who give you the licenses to make weapons. Even you build a small drone and you need an industrial license to build a drone. Like we have industrial licenses for weapons, even they need industrial licenses. Guys building other equipment require industrial license. The government knows who is in the space, and they also know who's just doing, just general brokering to actually building. It's not difficult for them to segment. They have enough information going up them. So it's a more focused effort and call, and the need that they have, that they need to bring. And you can easily turn this around. Like 2-3 years, you can turn the whole process around. It's not even a long time. Quick turnarounds can happen.
And you said, what message would you want to give to the powers that be? Just accept one particular thing, which is that the guys who actually built stuff on the ground in India, we will speak our minds because we've earned the right to actually get to this particular point. But it is all in the interest of national security. The guys who have actually done nothing in India would want to keep themselves as quiet as possible, because then it shows up as a lie at some point or the other, right? So I'm starting to see a lot more of those guys speaking up and saying, hey, listen, I've got a good product. Come down, see me. Yeah. But don't end up finishing up everything and then say, Tali baja, boys played well today. That's not going to work out.
Is that? Yeah, you need to be at war to be at peace. And that is a constant. You got to keep at it. You can't just say, I'm not going to go to war and be at peace. Not going to happen. It's not a single man's call. It takes two to tango, and the other side is not going to let you be in peace. So you got to be in war to be in peace. And that is something that you need to build capability for.
We war game when we need to start developing new products.
A weapon is always war gamed.
I think there's a view here that we kind of tend to only look at RFPs and say we'll build weapons there according to those RFPs. No, we've stopped doing that a few years back. Now, pretty much all of our efforts are guided by, okay, fine, this particular situation, this is the adversary, this is what he has, what can we do to improve the situation here?
How do we outrange him? How do we fire faster? How do we react faster? How do we have more kinetic energy in the weapons? There's a lot of science that goes into war. And that's what is thought out. It's no longer you do this at 100 meters, you reach, put it in mud and lift it and fire. That's the old Kalashnikov jokes. And they're not in real war. I mean, they did it just to prove a point that they were reliable. Today, it's not about just putting it in mud and firing. It's about, I can fire 3 rounds by the time you can bring your gun is what matters. How does it matter how reliable he is? Well, I'll have 3 rounds gone at him. I can keep it in the museum for reliability, but what I build will be firing faster, hitting him harder, and that's what matters.
So we'll end the podcast with Dinesh giving a clarion call to Indian engineers on why they should build in defense. So go for it, Dinesh.
No, I gave you the call. I mean, I told you what they need to do.
It's the hardest problem, so it deserves the brightest of our folks to get
that's
together
exactly
and solve
what we said. We said the same thing, that more people should be thinking offensively.
Yeah.
And taken a more offensive position in this space. And nobody is going to give you technology. You can be the best of the friends. Nobody will give you anything.
Right.
Everybody protects it more than they protect gold. So not a single company will give you. They'll give you a product to keep, but nobody's going to give you technology. Simple as that. For whatever monies you give as TOT, nobody's going to give you.
Right. Okay. On that note, we'll call a close to the podcast. But this was amazing. Thank you so much for the work that you guys are doing, and all the best for everything that you have coming up.
Thanks for coming, and always nice talking to you.
Sure.